have a very special guest with us this evening, Dr. Kimberly Pellum. I'm super excited for you all to meet her. I had the opportunity of meeting her in person during the Miss Black USA competition. She's amazing. She knows a lot about the history of Black pageant queens. She has a book entitled Black Beauties, where she talks all about the history of Black pageant queens and the importance of that. And so I'm super excited for you guys to learn from her this evening. And Dr. Pellum, you can go ahead and take it away.
Hey, everyone. I'm looking to see everybody. What's up, Morgan? Hey, Miss Marilyn. Hi, Kennedy. Hi, Anaya. Hey, Lauren. Hi, Aaliyah and Essence and Miss Sunshine State and Precious and Christina. Nice to see all of you all and happy Thanksgiving Eve. I am going to be brief and not keep you long. I'm going to share this book title with you all. I don't know if you can see it, but it says, "The Negro Woman as Our Standard." The Negro Woman as Our Standard. A little shameless plug to me. If you want to purchase this amazing, beautiful journal, you can do so via Amazon. But when you hear those words, the Negro Woman as Our Standard, can anybody tell me what that means to you?
To me, it means like just, I guess, kind of rethinking the beauty standards of, European women being the standards, and now the Negro woman, or just, Black woman, and really celebrating who we are and kind of making something for ourselves and our own beauty standards.
Thank you so much.
And I want to add, my name is Precious Foreman. I am Miss Virginia HBCU junior team.
You better come on and let us know who you are and what you're representing. Thank you so much for your response. And you're absolutely right. Those words speak to a challenge to American thinking, right? The traditional ideology around beauty suggests that women of European ancestry are indeed the barometer or the benchmark for which we should all reach as it relates to the issue of beauty. But I want to talk to you all about how sometimes, the assumption is we're doing something bigger or better or different than our ancestors. Have y'all ever heard people say, "I'm my ancestors' wildest dream," or "we're our ancestors' wildest dream"? Can somebody tell me what you think about those words? Like, what does that suggest, that we are our ancestors' wildest dreams?
Hi, my name is Talia Kennedy. I am Miss Texas. And I was gonna say, I think what they're saying is, by us being our ancestors' wildest dream, is our ancestors wish for freedom and they fought for it. And I am taking African American studies. They did go to court and fought for their freedom in different ways. They said that slavery is not a benign thing and that we are people and we should be humanized. So they're like, you are our wildest dreams, because they're looking at us as people and not as objects.
I'm so glad that you responded the way you did, Queen Halaya, or is it Halia? Halia, thank you. Nice to meet you. I'm so glad you offered that. There's a lot of wisdom in what you said, but I also want to point out something that a lot of people sort of immediately go to as it relates to our ancestors, and that's slavery, right? But when you really take into account the fullness of world history, slavery is really oblique, right? In the millennia that the world and humans have been in existence. And we know that people of African descent are the very first people, not only on the world, but the first people to give birth to civilization, right? And so people of African descent have a very long history that doesn't begin with slavery, right? There's a history of the continent of Africa, the nations within Africa, the tribal affiliations, the kingdoms, et cetera, et cetera. But when people talk about our ancestors, the sort of subconscious thought is slavery, right? And then thereafter slavery, the period that I studied, I found so much inspiration in it, right? You have people that ain't been out of bondage more than 10 years. And they already building schools. They are already establishing businesses. They are already representatives in local and in some cases national government, building colleges, okay, entire business districts and communities. And you're talking about just a few years away from slavery, which is the antithesis of what we're told, that these people during slavery didn't have any education and therefore could not think right, did not have advanced or sophisticated forms of communication with one another. No. The era directly after slavery, Reconstruction thereon, tells you what Black people were capable of without the bondage of slavery. And so going back to my original question, what does it mean for us to be our ancestors' wildest dream? The baseline assumption is always that Black folks were struggling, they were oppressed, and they were enslaved. And while that may be true, it's also unfair for us to think about people of African descent in just those terms, right? And so, yeah, if you don't study Black history, you will think you're the first person with a PhD Black from your, from your state or from your school. If you don't study African American history, yeah, you will think you're doing something big by getting your bachelor's degree. Not really. Right? Compared to individuals that have built the colleges, they built the universities. So when you offer that respect to our ancestors, I think it gives a different meaning to whether or not we actually are their wildest dream. And then we could take it a step further and say, like, which ones of us are the dream? Is it the doctors and the lawyers and the degreed people who hold themselves to a certain pedigree and a certain prestige? Or is it the individuals who understand the importance of community and collaboration and working with one another, regardless of what we have on, regardless of the degree, regardless of all of those things? And it requires a real deep study in our history to really think through that, right? Now, have y'all heard on social media where folks say, I'm not my ancestors? You got the crew that says, I'm my ancestors' wildest dreams. And then you have other folks on social media who say, I'm not my ancestors. You can catch these hands. Have y'all seen that? Really popular content where folks are suggesting that in moments of challenge, particularly after instances of police brutality, I'm not my ancestors. And the subtext in that is, I'm not what we think of when it comes to the modern civil rights movement. I'm not gonna turn the other cheek. I'm not nonviolent. You can catch these hands. And again, when you see things like on the internet, what they do is they advance these myths, these assumptions about who Black people were and perhaps who Black people are. But when you study the civil rights movement, what you find out is there are all kinds of beliefs. There are all kinds of ideologies. You got Marcus Garvey, you have Malcolm X, you have Martin Luther King, who throughout the trajectory of his career changes what he thinks about nonviolence, right? He had to be convinced at a certain point that nonviolence was a reasonable and effective route. And even in his nonviolence campaign, he was always protected by bodyguards and other individuals who believed in the importance of the Second Amendment. So it is much more complicated, my point is, than we often assume. So when it comes to this notion of beauty, the same thing is true, right? That we are fighting against this American standard, that we are fighting against whiteness, which is the beginning of beauty in America. And I want to offer you all today just a little bit of history that that may help you to appreciate some of the complexities as it relates to beauty in America. And I want to start with 1929. 1929. By this time, my grandmother is actually a 9-year-old. And in the year of 1929, a young, picturesque African-American woman by the name of Maisie Hubbard graced the cover page of Howard University's newspaper, The Hilltop. How many of you all have heard of Howard University? Shout out to DC, right? And so Maisie Hubbard is this gorgeous Black woman on the cover of Howard's newspaper. She's from Missouri. She has this chic, short haircut, ample set of Black tresses styled to rest on one side of her forehead. Her face is framed, meticulously arched, dark eyebrows, accentuated by a medium-sized hoop earrings. She's wearing a beaded pendant necklace. Her dress is embroidered with a playful floral design below the clavicle. Breathtaking, all right? The photo takes up the top half of the front page of this newspaper, and it's huge in terms of size compared to the other two profiles that sit on either side of this photo. And those two articles, other smaller photos, had to do with male student leadership at Howard. And she gets all of this platform because of her title in 1929 as Miss Howard, okay? The honor was attached to an institution at that time which already had national prominence. People knew what Howard meant. It had not reached the reputation that it gets later on as the Mecca, the pinnacle of Negro education, but it's close to it. It is a standard bearer in African-American higher ed, and this reputation stems from its progressive academic offerings, including a Master of Science degree program and a civil rights curriculum initiated by its School of Law. It also boasts a superstar faculty roster, including notable women such as Dean of Women, Lucy Diggs Slowe, who is also a tennis Olympian, Professor of Medicine, Dr. Dorothy Bolding Therapy, and beauty studies pioneer. You had somebody on Howard's campus as a professor teaching about beauty, and her name was Mary Rose Reeves Allen. So these are some of the things that helped Howard earn its reputation as the place to go for Black higher ed. It is within this context that the corresponding write-up about Maisie Hubbard, this fabulous Black girl who won the title of Miss Howard, it's within that context that she wins this title and this network that Howard has throughout Washington, D.C. Again, this is the nation's capital, right? And you have all of these upwardly mobile Black folks who have, many of them, government jobs, well-paying employment because simply they are in the nation's capital. Many of the Black folks in D.C. are the first freed as it relates to slavery and the Civil War. Lincoln signs into law something called compensated emancipation way before the Emancipation, well, I shouldn't say way before, but a few years before the Emancipation Proclamation. So my point is, Black folks in DC are doing well, relatively speaking. So by the time we hit this year of 1929 and Miss Maisie is on the cover of Howard's newspaper looking flawless, right? You have to take all of that into account. What does it mean to be Black in DC at that time? What does it mean to be at Howard? And what does it mean to be Miss Howard University in 1929? I'm gonna tell you what it means. She earns more than 7,000 votes of 26,000 casted. Now you have HBCUs now who don't even have 7,000 students. So how does Maisie Hubbard have 7,000 votes? I'm gonna tell you. Back then, the Black community is extremely insular because of segregation. And so what they do is they allow anybody in the Black community to vote, or what they call Friends of Howard. So students, alumni, and friends of the university. And so my assumption is they probably get the YMCA involved, they probably get Black churches involved, Black sororities and fraternities, and thus, even outside of the walls of Howard, you got 26,000 people casting their vote for a Miss Howard, not president of this and that, for a Miss Howard University, okay? And the numbers suggest just how engaged the Black public was concerning how they represented themselves and who best embodied that representation. Hubbard's soft yet deliberate fashion choices and firm pose spoke to her style intentionality, given the prestige of the associated title of Miss Howard. In 1929, same year, there's no such thing as Miss America. Okay, Miss America is established in, I think it's 1924, I believe, 1924, something around that time. But by the time we get to 1928, there's no Miss America. Okay, the Atlantic City-based competition, which is just about 190 miles from DC, had been suspended the previous year due to internal organizational challenges and criticism about the morality of the pageant, given its focus on women in swimwear as bait to attract tourists and increase boardwalk profits. In other words, Miss America is born out of white businessmen who want to put white women in bikinis in order to make money and bring more tourists to Atlantic City's boardwalk. All right. And so it drew a lot of criticism. So it begins to kind of wane because of that. But then what else happens in 1929? My scholars, the stock market crashes and it leads to the Great Depression. It forces Miss America into essentially what is a vegetative state, lasting another 4 years. So for about 5-6 years, there's no such thing as Miss America. And this window of time is an ideal lens through which to appreciate Howard as truly a different world, apart from national landscape, offering a different set of experiences and realities to African Americans inside of its halls. And so my point is, this specific year, we're living in a special time because ain't nobody thinking about Miss America. It literally doesn't exist. Meanwhile, Maisie Hubbard is on the cover of the most important newspaper in Washington, D.C., which is also the capital of the nation. At Howard, Black women could count on witnessing one of their elected and most admired queens every year. In May of 1930, Howard's campus community gave its full attention to its May Queen, Annetta Moten, who was the daughter of a Black Texas physician. And so again, bringing up that thought, we are our ancestors' wildest dreams. Are we? We've been doctors, honey. We've been queens. What is you saying? Okay. The May Queen was selected by women students exclusively, and the prerequisites for successful candidates were clear: academic standing and a pleasing personality. So already we have some differentiation, right, between what Miss America is founded on and what you see at Black colleges like Howard. Howard is a university, so the academic excellence piece is already tied in. We ain't got to invent no scholarship. We ain't got to say academics are important, although we do. It's already there. Whereas meanwhile, Miss America has to kind of innovate that by the time she gets to the 1940s. The women-led process and its emphasis on scholastic achievement demonstrated the specific posture of what historians call New Negro womanhood during the 1920s, which represented the sensibilities of modern Black women who sought to determine for themselves the outcome of their lives, including a prioritization of self-expression in their interior lives and on public platforms, whereas previous generations were disallowed from exercising such freedom. 1929's May Queen, 1930's May Queen, just like the previous year, 1929, Miss Howard enjoyed front page space on the Hilltop. So this is what Black colleges are doing every year. It's very interesting to fast forward 20 years later, or excuse me, 100 years later. By the time we get to 2020, we see the New York Times headline saying that you had 3 Black major queen title holders, Miss USA, Miss America, and I believe it was Miss Universe, some other one. And so there is this attention that sometimes people place on us getting into the American systems, the traditional systems, so to speak. But what the history bears out is that these young Black women at Black colleges have already experienced adulation, platform, admiration, congratulations, and every other kind of Asian in the context of affirmation via these Black institutions. And so in 1930, Anna Moten, who is the May Queen, is the center of attention in a week-long set of university events branded as May Week. Celebrating the Queen. And the column stated, instead of merely having the Queen crowned, the entire week of May 18th has been given over to the celebration of the May Festival. It provided an overview of each of the day's activities, which included a ceremonial chapel address from a dean from the University of Pittsburgh. So in this case, you had white women deans from other universities coming to see the Queen at Howard University. They had a formal dinner, a tea, a pageant, all kinds of observances throughout the week. The Hilltop newspaper also noted that the Queen will be crowned amidst a beautiful setting, which will be made more charming through the introduction of dancers, character, and otherwise. Also telling of Howard was a unique and progressive hub in African-American life. Of the 11 headlines in the newspaper celebrating the May Queen, 8 of them focused on women, right? And again, the tradition says, the master narrative tells us that women didn't have many rights, women aren't doing well. But if you look at the primary sources and what Black history bears out, is that in many of our spaces, women were respected, and that doesn't mean that's across the board, but that does mean that you cannot compare our past and our practices to the ways in which other cultures live and approach life. Aside from May Week, the content included articles about Delta Sigma Theta sorority and the role of Greek life in racial uplift, a tea honoring mothers, women in architecture. Like we see these big headlines today on social media, like women in STEM, women doing this. And it's like, no, you look at the 1930 issue of the Hilltop, you will find women in architecture, women in dentistry, women as deans. In addition to participating in special conferences which addressed issues faced by women students, Dean Lucy Diggs Slow also presented a speech to the Federal Council of Churches in Ohio titled "The Effect of Race Prejudice on Negro Students' Thinking." The overall content of this newspaper that I'm talking about implies a few things about Howard culture. Number one, ain't nothing gonna kill Black folks. This is the height of Great Depression. And Black folks decided they still gonna have a tea, they still gonna have a pageant, and they still gonna find a way to affirm one another. Number two, our contests were different from the traditional pageants that you may have seen elsewhere. Miss America does resume in 1928, and the bikini portion continues up until very recently. That's not a part of what Black college pageantry is about. Beauty is deeper. It was never connected to money and profits. In fact, money and profits, we know, are a non-factor as it relates to HBCU pageants. And lastly, as it relates to what happens on our campuses, different from Miss America and any other, the Negro woman is our standard. Thank you all so much for having me. stay on a few more minutes to answer any questions.
Hi, my name is Morgan Reese Wellens. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm Miss Peach State Junior HBCU Teen, and I plan to attend the Howard University in the fall of 2026.
Hey.
My question is, in your opinion, what is the biggest difference between Black pageants and traditional pageants like Miss America or Miss Universe?
So I feel like some of my earlier commentary kind of touched on that, like from the beginning, right? Like what motivates the origins, how we come into being is totally different, right? It's in many times it's related to football activities, homecoming activities, when you start to see early queens on HBCU campuses. In many instances, like I just mentioned, the May Queen, it's tied to May Queen festivities. So this whole idea of the ideal woman and spring and coming into, the new season or our newness as it relates to time and seasonal changes. And so it's not a business arrangement in the way that Miss America is, Miss USA is. I mean, Miss USA was literally founded by a swimwear company. It was meant to serve as a marketing mechanism to advance, I think it was Catalina swimwear. Miss America was founded to stimulate business opportunities on the Atlantic City boardwalk. So yeah, from the founding, what Black pageants do is just very different from what, the business more popular pageants. I'm gonna come up with a term beyond mainstream. And the reason I think that's important is because truly, and this is like no shade, but you have to be mindful of everybody's experience. And because I was raised on the Black institutional tradition, in my mind, Miss Tuskegee is mainstream. Like I didn't learn about that other stuff until much later. My own children can probably name about 10 HBCUs right now. And if you ask them what Auburn or Alabama is or Florida State, they're gonna look at you like you're crazy because they do not know. And so I think mainstream suggests that, I think it suggests that they are the standard. And that's not true for everyone. In the same way, it's not true that everyone is attracted to or embraces this idea of of white women being a beauty standard. Sure, I'm sure that there are plenty of Black women and girls who trip up on very colonized and European-centered standards of beauty. And I mean, even I did it at a certain period of time. Middle school, I was wearing hazel contacts, looking crazy. But I just think it's important to not suggest that is the norm for everyone, because it's not. And then beyond how they were founded, literally how they function is completely different. At Black schools, in many instances, it is truly a popularity contest. I went to judge a Miss ASU pageant recently, and the winner was dark brown, beautiful, round sister, plenty of shape, plenty of body, giving it to And you just wouldn't see that elsewhere. And the crowd they went up for her, and it wasn't on some I feel sorry. No, they were really like, so it's just a completely different cultural experience. Y'all have been to the pageants. Y'all have seen the girls do the hip hop on the piano, play the hip hop on the violin. You ain't doing that, in other spaces. So there are tons of differences that we could certainly unpack.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jean Thomas. I'm representing Tennessee for the Junior HBCU Teen Pageant. I first wanted to say how informative and impactful this talk has been. I've never learned so much, and I think it's simply because it's not part of curriculums in schools where you can learn about all of this history and all of our history in this way. But I did want to ask, were Black women allowed in the Miss America pageants, Miss USA pageants, due to segregation laws, and up until what time? And if so, how did that change pageantry?
Great question. Before I get to your question, I just want to say thank you to Dr. Sherri. This was a last minute request. I am a mother of 2 young children, and I did not know that my husband was going to be leaving the house. He just let me know, and about an hour ago, I reached out to Queen Sherri to see if she will be willing to support me on this forum. And in doing so, I wanted to take a moment just to highlight for you all, this is the difference between other pageants and the sisterhood of Black institutions, and not just Miss FAMUs and the queen aspect of Black institutions, but just what you find between Black women in general on Black college campuses. You have people's number. You're able to reach out. You're able to make the most of that network. There are 26 Black women on this call right now. There are not 26 Black Miss Americas in the history of that pageant, right? The message that I sent to Queen Sherri in our Miss FAMU group me, I think there are about 40 Miss FAMUs, and those are just the ones who are have a cell phone, right? That doesn't even go through the genealogy of Miss FAMU. And so my point is, you won't find us represented in those spaces in such large numbers. And so certainly you won't find our culture, you won't find our ways of being, you won't find our identity, you won't find our phenotypes, you won't find, and so when you ask about the differences, we could go on and on and on. But to your question, Jean, about Miss America and Miss USA, I don't really study Miss USA as much as I do Miss America, because I use Miss America in my research as sort of a reference point to frame other conversations about Black beauty, since Miss America is probably just the most popular brand, if you will, as it relates to pageants. But Miss America, since its inception, had what was known as Rule 7, which was that one had to be white and in good health in order to participate in the competition. Furthermore, if one could provide documentation related to her connection to the Mayflower, like how white and how American are you, essentially, is what they're asking by asking for evidence of one's connection to the Mayflower. Speaking of Thanksgiving, right, and the Pilgrims, that is what Miss America was asking contestants to provide in exchange for better standing within the competition. Their first group of Black participants participated as slaves. They were enslaved people in a musical number. And it is not until maybe the 40s and 50s that they at least did away with the written Rule 7. And we don't see an actual Black state participant. I think it was Miss Ohio, Cheryl, I can't remember her last name, But in the 1970s, she became a participant on the state, or a winner on the state level. And then finally in 1984, we see Vanessa Williams win the first Miss America title as a Black woman. They embarrass her. They essentially remove her crown. She is expunged from the record of Miss America until a few years ago, where they formally apologized for how they treated her. The initial excuse in 1984 was that she had posed for some nude photos and did not represent the organization well in having posed for those photos. But those photos were taken before she participated in the title. So surely somebody knew that the photos existed, but they decided to allow her to win and then shame her throughout national media. It's incredibly embarrassing. There's a documentary on Netflix called something about Black Beauty. I can't remember. But she's in it, and she talks about like what it means to have been embarrassed on a national level, and the support that she felt from the Black community, especially in our institutions, our media vehicles like Essence magazine. So yeah, you won't find many of us, and you won't find much of our experiences represented in those spaces. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't pursue that, right? You just, everybody is, and there's, there's perks. There's someone who has helped me quite a bit, Erica Dunlap. I think she was like maybe the third or fourth Black Miss America, and she wrote the foreword to my book, and she didn't mind talking about some of the pitfalls that she experienced as a Black Miss America, especially from Florida. So she's been very helpful to me and very forthcoming about her experience as well. So.
And let me just add a little bit there. There was very enlightening and interesting to hear about Rule 7. But I was, let's put it this way, Vanessa Williams and I are the same age. We're both pushing 60. So I was alive the same time when she was crowned Miss America, and finding Black faces in some of the white pageants is sort of like pledging African American sorority and pledging a white sorority. Once you are the queen of the University of the HBCU, you are forever a queen.
That part.
And then once you pledge that sorority, that African American sorority, you are forever a member of that sorority. That's a lifetime. That's a lifetime. So again, it's so refreshing. You feel so honored when we return for homecoming, and then you hear the crowd when you're walking the field saying, "That's my Miss FAMU. That's my Miss FAMU." So you will always be revered and held on a certain I hate to use the word pedestal, but your comrades and your classmates love you forever. So there's a huge difference. I have a question. I know I'm late to the party, but so what are you all what's the pageant? So in the junior HBCU.
These queens are participating in the Miss HBCU Teen Pageant. Tonight we have our junior contestants on, as well as a few of our senior contestants, but they'll be competing at the end of February for the title of Miss HBCU Junior Teen. The pageant pretty much is focused on encouraging our high school students to attend HBCUs. And so the girls who are part of this competition are competing for scholarships to their HBCUs. We have a lot of different girls going to different HBCUs. This will be our 4th year doing this pageant, and we've just seen so much success, and this will actually be the first year that we have a junior teen competition. And so these queens on here are a part of that inaugural class. And so we wanted to do this session specifically because, as Jean stated, these things aren't taught in the curriculum. And so we wanted to make sure that they had a background knowledge regarding what Black pageantry is, and the importance and differences from the pageants that they may see on TV.
Now, are the majority of you, what type of high school do you go to? Do you go to a junior HBCU high school, or do you go to a predominantly white high school, or what's the culture at your high school?
Mine is predominantly white. I live in the suburbs, so I'm going to a public. It was public, and my parents assumed that there are more Black students there, but it's still very, very white, and we don't get a lot of culture taught at school, and I don't get to have it. I'm not surrounded by it as maybe other students would be. But it was definitely worse when I went to private school, which is also predominantly white.
So I came from a similar situation in high school. Like I said, this was in the 70s and 80s. But anyway, I came from a similar situation. And so it was sort of odd. I played the violin. I was in the orchestra. So not what you consider African-American type stuff, go cool stuff. So it was a little bit different. I remember when I applied to FAMU, of course, I was accepted at places like MIT and I got other schools as well. So I remember when I decided to go to FAMU, a lot of my classmates, they were like, ooh, you're going to, number one, they had never heard of FAMU, but then they were like, oh, you're going to FAMU, you're going to waste your talents there. So when I got to FAMU, it felt so good feeling like I belong, and I could be myself. I was still the same goofy girl playing the violin, but that was a different type talent. So when I ran from Miss FAMU, I sang and played the violin. So I heard Kimberly saying HBCU pageants are like a popularity contest, and they are, but it's also a we still rely on, at least we used to back then, rely on a talent as well. So it's a completely different experience, but even at a HBCU, you can still be yourself. So I have 3 sons. So my oldest is 25, and he went to, he calls it MMI. I'm like, what the heck is an MMI? He's like a minority institution, where basically it's a PWI, predominantly white institution, but they have a large percentage of minorities. I said, okay. And then my second son went to 2 PWIs for undergrad and for graduate school. And then my third son, who's a freshman in college this year, he was the only one to go to an HBCU, and he is loving it because their high school experience was similar to mine. So he's loving. I always joke with him and say, you are living your best life, but he loves it. So be proud of who you are and what you've grown into. It doesn't matter what background you're coming from. Be yourself and love yourself and enjoy yourself.
Do you feel at an HBCU it's easier to find like-minded people and people that think like you and have similar personalities when they do look like you versus a mixed group of people?
Absolutely. So like I said, I was a little high school geek with the violin. I think I was in the coolest thing I did. I was a majorette in the marching band. Then when I got to FAMU, and I had this long conversation with my 18-year-old son who goes to Delaware State now. So his concern was coming from a similar environment, and he was like, oh, I won't fit in. I said, you'll fit in. Like I said, there will be other Black kids who are just as geeky as you. So you will find your niche. Just because you go to an HBCU doesn't mean everybody is I don't know what you young folk use now, but hip and lit or whatever y'all call it. Everybody has a different personality, and you gravitate towards the like-minded people or what you're comfortable with.
Mm-hmm. And my second question was towards Black Pageantry. And it was that she did speak on America's standards of beauty. And I was like, for Black African Americans, we also have our own standards of beauty. So how would we balance that when also going into pageantry? Because we have our own standards paired with their standards. So wouldn't that weigh down on the person that is going into that?
It depends on like what avenue you're going into. Are you going into sort of Eurocentric pageantry? Are you talking about Black college pageants? Are you talking about Miss Black USA? I mean, there are all kinds of pageants out here. There are specific cultural pageants, Miss Juneteenth. So I think you have to consider, what kind of pageant you are pursuing. But always, I don't care. This applies to your job, your family life, your romantic life. Do what works for you. I don't care if you're at the most Eurocentric pageant of all time, like whiteness is the standard. If that's not who you are, don't do that. Don't do that. Never, ever do that. And it's so important that you learn that lesson, embrace that lesson now, because it's difficult to reel yourself back in when you get away from yourself. Once you start dibbling and dabbling in things that do not reflect your interior value system, because that's what matters most, right? There are times I love, if I were to take my bun down, my daughter asks me all the time, why is your hair black and gold? And it's because I dye my hair blonde often. And it's because I like to. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you like a good wig, if you like a good weave, like do that. I like color. I think it's fun, especially right now, because I'm getting into my 40s and I'm getting my little grays, and color gives me something fun to do and allows me to cover my grays a little bit. But I'm somebody who studies Black history deeply. And so for me, it's not an attempt to be someone other than who I am. It's just a fun thing that I do as an accessory. So I think you have to kind of determine that for yourself. Like, why are you wearing that wig? Truly. Is it because you enjoy it? And if that is the case, wear it. If it is because you deem your own hair to be insufficient, that's different, and that's where we have a problem.
Speaking of hair, usually the majority of my patients are Caucasian, so they'll see me. Ooh, Dr. James, your hair is different. I may come in with a fro. I may come in with braids. I may come in with cornrows. So I always tell them, oh, I like to change it up. It's my personality. They're like, okay. So the point is, be yourself.
At all times. And I hate to like be extreme, but to err on the side of protecting you all. I'm a mother, so I have strong sensitivities around young girls. When people sense that you don't know who you are, they take advantage of you. And so that's why I say it's incredibly important for you to say, actually, that job doesn't reflect my value system. So I want to apply. The money looked good. It looked attractive. I like the title, but it's not for me. It's important for you to be strong enough to say, I spent a year in this grad program and I don't like the chair. He gives me uncomfortable vibes. I don't like spending time in his office. I'll find another program. Like, you have to be real clear on the internal conversations that you have with yourself, especially as it relates to beauty, because it's one of those things that people can easily influence you. Girl, you'll look better if you did this. Men will do that to you. You know, my husband has told me, he don't like my blonde hair. Guess what? I be coloring my hair blonde because you're here for something other than my hair. You gotta be. And so, like, you can't cower to what other individuals prefer, and not even to what society prefers. you have to stay true to yourself.
Hi, my name is Shayla, and I'm representing Massachusetts for the Miss HBCU Junior Teen Pageant. And to be honest, I don't really have a question. I was just going to elaborate about the high school experience and like what type of... I've been in a predominantly white school since before kindergarten, and I'm a junior. It's 10 Black kids in the whole class of 500. Not good at all. I needed something different. I've been through experiences in history class, talking about slavery. You got one little white kid looking over his shoulder. I mean, I just be like, hey,
and
like,
short is you can't even talk about that. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, like, and after years of being in a predominantly white school, I just felt like HBCU is where I like wanted to keep going in school. I needed to change, a different environment, surround myself with different people, actually be myself. They was like, oh, Shayla, you got a lot of options you go to. Why you want to go to HBCU? I just want to. There's no explanation. I just do.
Hi, I'm Miss Washington, HBCU Junior Teen, and my name's Kennedy. I just wanted to kind of elaborate on what Shayla just talked about because I really related to her experience. So I go to a predominantly Indian school because I go to like a STEM school, and I'm a junior now, and I've been the only Black person at my school for 3 years now. So that's why I want to go to an HBCU, because I never had that experience coming from a PWI to like still like being like now the only Black person in my school for 3 years. So like I just know that's what like I want for myself, to like find that sense of community within my people. And like how Shayla talked about history class, I did have that same experience, but in English, and we were reading a book where like the N-word was used heavily. And I wasn't there that day actually, but the teacher told them all to be extra nice to me when we're reading that book, and just like kind of put the focus on me, since like I'm the only Black person in the school and in those classes as well. And that's just like something like I just don't want to go through again with my education. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Just want to thank you so much, Dr. James, for joining us tonight. It's greatly appreciated. You and Dr. Pellum were able to bring a lot of wisdom into this conversation. So we really appreciate you, and thank you for being here tonight.
All right, thank you. Good. Thanks for having me. I go back to meal prepping. So 2 of my sons are home. So one of them brought his girlfriend. So we've been meal prepping. All right, y'all take care, ladies.
My name is Anaya Coffey, Miss Cherry Blossom HBCU Teen, and I am from Washington, D.C., and I plan to attend Bowie State University in the fall of 2024. And one thing that I learned today was just generally a lot of perspective. For me, I've attended all the way from pre-K to now 12th grade in predominantly African-American schools. I never really encountered being around white students until I met one white student in middle school. So I wasn't really used to like seeing other people that didn't really look like me. So being able to hear like the perspective and how other students were able to grow up in that environment and their reasons for attending the HBCUs, and why just in general HBCU pageants are important, is something that I learned.
Hey y'all, my name is Talia Kennedy. I am from Dallas, Texas, and I aspire to attend Texas Southern University. And something I learned from this workshop is about Miss Hubert and how she was the first, I wouldn't say the first, as the lady said, she was the 1929 Miss Hilltop, that she was Miss Howard at the time, which was something that stuck out to me because that is something I actually did, that I am planning to do, when I do go to college, because I do want to enter in HBCU pageants, and hearing about the difference between Black pageantry and HBCU pageants really showed me the difference, and hearing from everybody else's experiences about their schools and how they dealt with, I'm gonna say adversity. Well, it is adversity being the only Black kid in your school, because I do come from a primarily Latino school, and having to really fight for a safe space for the Black students is really hard when you're outnumbered. That's why I can say having that as a staple in our community and having leaders pave that way for us is a very good example of that.
My name is Malaysia. I'm Miss Charm City Junior Teen. I'm from Maryland, and one thing that I learned this evening was the importance of representation of Black women in pageants, because, over the years, our representation hasn't been that great, but as time moves on, it's been getting better and better. So I really learned the importance of having a representation and a good person to represent Black women in the pageant world, because it's very important for little Black girls like me and you, and even younger girls growing up, to see someone like them and see someone with their same skin color, someone that talks like them, someone with the same hair pattern as them, to, be up on TV in a nice, pretty, sparkly dress, participating in a pageant. So I really feel like that's something that was important, and it really stuck to me this evening. So that's something that I really like to hear.
Okay. Hi, my name is Jean Thomas. I am representing Tennessee for the Junior Miss HBCU pageant. I am planning to attend Spelman, hopefully getting into that honors program. What I really took away from what was being said during the history presentation, I really enjoyed hearing both sides of the statement, being that I am my ancestors' biggest, wildest dream, right? Well, I think that that statement is true, simply because I think the dream was the continuation of something that they started. Not seeing that dream die, seeing other Black girls continue to be representatives for generations to come, and to keep on doing those pageants that they were doing to build up the Black community.
Thank you, Dr.
Dr.